Okay, so all of this sets up what I want to show you with what's going on in Persepolis at the same time, right? If we imagine this to be the 5th century, and some of what I want to share, I have it cited later in a couple of articles if you're interested in this, tracking this down. But so these are what are from the Apadana Reliefs of Darius, who is the king of Persia, roughly contemporary with this time. 522 to 446, so for quite a span of time. So this is a map of the Persian government, at least the rule of Persia, like the Persian Empire rather. So like here is the Babylonian Empire, Babylon here, right? Assyria is farther north. Jerusalem is this little place in the hills down here. But I mean, the Persian rule spread all the way over Egypt, which, like the Babylonian Empire, never took Egypt. And the end of the Persian Empire basically came about because they got into close to Macedonia, the homeland of Alexander the Great, and then he pushes back and conquers them all. But the city, the main area of Persian's rule, or the center of Persian rule, is right here in Persepolis. So here's Babylon, right? The Persian Gulf where the Tigris and Euphrates meet and flow into the Persian Gulf. Persepolis is east of this area. So just for your reference. And in Persepolis, we have these reliefs, monumental reliefs of King Darius that he built he built Persepolis to be his capital. And there are inscriptions and then these depictions of the centrality of the king's capital. And so and I'll show you some pictures, but basically what we're going to see is the nations bringing wealth to Persepolis and sort of submitting to Persian rule. So, for example, and we got to piece some of this together, but try to follow me along with this. First of all, notice these are the stairs going up to the capital, the central place of the capital. So you have a sun disk with wings out on the sides here, right? And everything is walking toward the sun. The sun disk is a representation of Ahura Mazda, who is the Persian deity, Ahura Mazda, 2 different words. So I guess I don't have it up here, but all of the Persian nobles and warriors who are being depicted right here are like facing the sun disk. And also the sun is, an image that shines out upon all of these people coming to it. So it's the deity of the royal cult. And it's associated with the king. So the royal cult, the king is essentially the representation of the deity. So the king's power shines outward toward the people as they move toward him to offer tribute. This is, by the way, not the whole city. It's this large columned like reception hall. So a place where the king would have potentially received visitors. The reliefs span almost 300 feet. So just some images of the stairs, and you'll notice like the 3 registers here where all of these different people are facing this one direction and walking toward this one direction where the center is the king. Brent Strawn, well, let me show you a few more. Here's the east panel, the west panel, some close-ups where you have the deity. Notice the footstool, right? So when we talked about Isaiah 6, we looked at iconographic images of royalty sitting on a throne. But the king here is being honored. Notice, by the way, that this figure, and these are all Persians, but the Persian is coming, he's covering his mouth in the presence of the deity. It's an image of, I recognize your authority, I won't speak in your presence. This image, by the way, comes up a lot in the book of Job. So it's like this nice icon, you cover your mouth in the in the presence of somebody who has something more authoritative to say. Okay, and so I know you may not be able to see this real well. Hopefully you can see well enough. But the thing is, foreign nations are they're different types of clothing that fit different nations. And so through scholars then have been able to identify these different groups who are coming to Persepolis. And so the Medes, the Elamites, the Aryans, I can hardly read that, Arachosians? I don't know who they are. Need to find that out. The Armenians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Libyans, Cappadocians. So all these kind of places within the Persian Empire, they are coming to Persepolis, and they're bearing gifts with them. So, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but they're bringing basically their wealth to the Persian government, to the Persian king. So along with this is some propaganda about Darius, King Darius, and his tomb that subjugates, that he subjugated all of these people, right? So he would claim, by the favor of Ahura Mazda, again the deity, these are the countries which I seized outside of Persia. I ruled over them. They bore tribute to me. That was said to them by me, that they did my law. They held them firm. And then listing all of the different nations that are essentially depicted in image in iconographic form at Persepolis. Then skipping to the end. If now thou shalt think, how many are the countries which King Darius held? Look at the sculptures of those who bear the throne, then you shall know. So just look and see, this is what happened. So at his tomb, his tomb inscription coordinates with the image. A lot of this, by the way, is coming from an article. I'll come back to these. By Brent Strawn, A World Under Control in Isaiah 60, and the Apadana Reliefs from Persepolis. Brent Strawn does a lot with iconography of the Old Testament. Just to give you some close-up imagery, we have these kind of foreign nations. They're supporters of the throne, so like holding up the throne of the king. You can see there's camels, which is important for Isaiah 60. And there's, if we look real closely, you can see that they're bringing gifts, and they're all kind of dressed differently. Now, the Jews are not mentioned by name in this. There are some headdresses that perhaps fit with how Jews are otherwise imagined, but note whether they're there or not in iconography, it's this idea that for the Persian government is claiming authority and expressing authority in picture form by the foreign nations peacefully, by their own will, bringing tribute and paying homage to the king. And the peacefulness part of that is important because, like, if you think about Assyrian propaganda, right? Think about like when we talked about Sennacherib's propaganda about taking and destroying Lachish. In his palace, he has images of Judeans with stakes running through them, like its devastation and war, its power, its military might. The Persian government took pride in sort of the nations paying tribute and honoring without that. Like, they come of their own will. They love me. Like, everybody loves me. I don't have to force them to do this. They want to bring me their wealth, right? And this actually fits better with what we see in Isaiah 60. Then this isn't God forcing the nations to come. They're coming because Jerusalem is shining. Jerusalem is radiant, and they're bringing their tribute because they love they're seeking the good of Jerusalem and the city of Yahweh. So there are several motifs that I think actually fit really well, and then we might even, I think be able to make a compelling argument that Isaiah 60 is sort of a counter propaganda against Persian propaganda. And again, Strawn's article brings this out, and also one by Chris Jones. So if you want to dig into this more, those articles are there. But the shared motifs, one is light, right? So Ahura Mazda is a sun disk, and Isaiah 60 begins with the light of Yahweh dawning upon Jerusalem and shining, radiating out to these people who are in darkness. And when they see this great light, they bring their tribute voluntarily. There's no military image in chapter 60, unless, especially if that verse 12 is a later addition. So Strawn concludes that Isaiah 60 deliberately alludes to Persian imperial propaganda and transfers its point of reference from the Achaemenid capital Persepolis to the Judahite capital Jerusalem. So, dear Persian government, you think that Persepolis is and Ahura Mazda and your king is the center of the universe. Well, it's actually Jerusalem, and it's actually Yahweh. Right, so it's picking up this propaganda or this imagery, and Yahweh is the king. And I think that's always an important theme, that even when you have Davidic imagery, for Israel, it's essential that Yahweh's kingship is primarily expressed, and not, you don't have something like you have in King Darius's tomb inscription about what I did, a king by the power of Ahura Mazda or whatever foreign deity. This is pretty common in the ancient world, and you don't have that in, at least so far. We don't have any kings bragging about themselves. And the biblical testimony is certainly that Yahweh is sovereign, Yahweh is king. In Jones' argument, which picks up, he doesn't do so much with the iconography, but it basically makes a similar argument that Jerusalem, not Persepolis, draws all nations into the light of its patron deity. So the nations come to worship Yahweh. Tribute will be brought to Yahweh at Jerusalem for the purpose of restoration. So a pushback against Persian rule. So this is different than what we saw in 2nd Isaiah, where Persian rule is celebrated with Cyrus. Now they've lived under Persian rule long enough that they're pushing back against their authority, or at least their sovereignty.